Hey guys, today we are going to be delving into a two-part video series that I have for you guys. Today we are going to be delving into what made the Colossals go to sleep and their lore in general. Throughout this two-part video series, we are going to be going into tons of loose ends in terms of the lore, so I hope you guys are really excited because I am. I've been working hard on this video series. You can expect the second part soon. Anyway, let's get straight into it and look into why the Colossals went to sleep and their lore, and also this huge theory that I have. So first of all, as I have said, we are going to be going into the lore behind the Colossals not singing and the Colossals' lore in general. So first, everything on the continent was fine, and this was known as the Golden Age of the Dawn of Fire era. However, then a disruptive force caused the Colossals to forget how to sing. It is unknown what this disruptive force was. However, this piece of lore confirms that the Colossals are indeed capable of singing and did sing at one point before the disruptive force took away their singing abilities after the Golden Age of the Dawn of Fire era. Then the same disruptive force that caused the Colossals not to be able to sing caused the continent to split up. Once the continent began to split up and was affected by the disruptive force, all of the monsters went to their individual elemental lands on the continent when the continent began to split up. The water elementals went to the waterlands on the continent, for example, if you want an example. But the fire elementals, unlike the other monsters, all went into the living core. The living core is essentially the volcano you guys see in the trailers, also known as Fire Haven. The fire elementals went in here as they didn't have an elemental land on the continent. For some unknown reason though, all of the fire elementals went inside the living core and didn't go to the other elemental lands like the plant lands for some reason on the continent when some other monsters did. This is currently a plot hole, so your guess is as good as mine as to why the fire elementals went inside the living core instead of going to other lands like the other monsters did. So yeah, your guess is as good as any. It's also unclear why some other elementals went to certain lands, like Shrub going to the waterlands, for example, with it having the elements of plant and rock, as we see with its presence on Water Island. Anyway, after the monsters all went to their individual lands, the Colossals guided and helped save the rest of the pieces of the continent lands. So basically, we have the Colossals to thank for even having the islands in My Singing Monsters today, which is really good if you think about it, because otherwise we wouldn't even know any monsters today, and if the Colossals wouldn't have actually saved them, then we wouldn't actually know about any monsters today, and we wouldn't even have the islands. So we have the Colossals basically to thank for My Singing Monsters in general, guys. The Colossals then proceeded to embed their life force into the islands to save the islands and the monsters on top of them, which is why they remain dormant all across the islands. Through binding their spirits/life force to each of the islands, they aided the islands in becoming what they are today and preserved the monsters on the islands. Without the Colossals as help, guys, the islands and monsters perhaps wouldn't exist now. So we have the Colossals to thank for the game, basically. Their fate was really tragic if you think about it as well. The lore behind the Colossals doesn't explain about Titans, however, I believe the Titans weren't affected by the disruption when you consider how they have been noted to be capable of moving in the main game, and perhaps weren't even around in the era of Dawn of Fire, because we don't know if they were or not. It's not been confirmed. I don't think Titans have the ability to sing anyway either, but that's a completely opinionated comment there, and I could be completely wrong. I think certain lore we don't know regarding the Titans, some elementals going to the wrong islands when the continent split, like Potbelly going to the waterlands and the fire elementals only going to the living core, unlike other monsters, definitely needs to be explored, guys, and questioned about. Another missing lore point that isn't clear right now is how the other Colossals were affected by the disruptive force. We know, of course, islands like Ethereal Island have a Colossal on it. Is it the case that the Colossals all had to make a collaborative effort when the disruptive force came along to save every species of monster that existed, like the Ethereals and Sugar Fam, if they even existed then, in the era that concluded Dawn of Fire when the thing behind the disruptive force wreaked havoc? That's another thing as well, because something must have caused the disruptive force itself. Also, I think it should be questioned if the thing behind the disruptive force actually intended to cause the devastating effects to the monster world that concluded the Golden Age of Dawn of Fire. We don't know if the thing causing the disruptive force only meant to do something and caused a ton of other issues as a result accidentally. Like the continent splitting, for example. Perhaps they didn't mean to do that. Maybe they only meant to seal away the Colossals' singing abilities. It also should be questioned why the Colossals intended to save the monsters and the islands in the first place. Were they guilty for causing this disruptive force to wreak havoc all across the monster world? Did they want to save the islands and the monsters on them because of how they felt guilty towards what they'd done? Honestly, who knows? Anyway, so would the Colossals wake up? It is unknown if they are capable of waking up in terms of the law and what we know right now. However, we do know they almost certainly would if they were given their life force back somehow, because that is in the law right there, guys, and that is confirmed. That is why they are dormant right now. And of course, as we know, their life force was taken when they embedded their life force into the islands they combined with, when they saved the continent at the end of the golden age of Dawn of Fire. I believe that whatever is behind the disruptive force that caused the continent to split would be capable of empowering the Colossals and bringing them back to life and restoring their abilities to sing, more than likely if they had the power to cause such a disruption and make the Colossals forget how to sing in the first place. I think it must also be the case that they should be able to restore the Colossals' singing abilities and their life force if they had the power to cause such a disruption in the first place to the monster world. Because if you think about it, the monster world is absolutely ginormous, so this creature must have some insane power, and I think it must be able to restore the singing capabilities of the Colossals and restore their life force. Anyway, let's come back to this question after exploring each Colossal so we can gather up more information about each Colossal and certain lore behind each one so that we can perhaps reach a conclusion. I also want to delve into each specific Colossal, as whilst I do believe all Colossals would have become dormant all at once, because it would just make a lot of sense in terms of the lore and things, it is still unclear, and when you consider the nature of some Colossals I'm going to talk about, some questions definitely arise. Right, let's delve into other Colossals besides the continent lands that form the natural islands. Colossals don't actually have names, guys, in terms of the lore, so I'm just going to call them by their individual islands' names, and also if I called them by their individual names, if they had any anyway, it'd make it really confusing. Anyway, let's get into it. So Firehaven's Colossal and Fire Oasis's are the only ones shown to have one eye. Firehaven's Colossal is the only one shown to have part of its body actually visible on the screen. The hands are shown if you have a look. Besides the eyes, you can often see ears across each island, like on Earth Island 2, where you can see the Colossals as ears. The only exceptions to this are on Ethereal Island, Wobbling Island, Composer Island, Air Island, Gold Island, and Fire Oasis. It's likely that their ears are further down though for these islands. We don't see a Colossal's body across any of the islands. The best thing we get to seeing what a Colossal's body looks like is in Furcon's Jelly Dreams, but that isn't canon at all, and is inaccurate because of how it all took place literally inside of Furcon's dreams. So it's not canon at all, guys, and we can't count that whatsoever. In terms of why we are discussing a Colossal's body in the first place, well, if you think about it, looking at the size of its body would help us determine perhaps the amount of power that the thing behind the disruptive force would have been capable of, potentially, with it sealing away all of the Colossal's singing abilities. So if we knew the size of a Colossal, potentially, it could help us in figuring out what exactly this thing behind the disruptive force is actually capable of. Whilst Firehaven isn't a natural island, so to speak, it would have definitely been impacted by the disruptive force, as it was right next to it all inside the living core. So right there we do have confirmation that Firehaven would have indeed been affected by it, and that the Colossal of Firehaven was indeed impacted by it, like to the other Colossals too. Whilst it may be unclear for other Colossals if it was the case that they were affected by it too, I think it's extremely likely because they all remain dormant across the islands. We are going to get into individual island circumstances. Also, Fire Oasis's Colossal was artificially made by the monsters, however, and is the second only island Colossal to be artificially made. This raises the question of whether the Fire Oasis Colossal would actually be able to sing if it was indeed given its life force back. I think this would definitely be the case, as Fire Oasis's Colossal, just unlike the other islands, hasn't actually had a life force yet, but I 100% think that if it was given a life force, like the rest of the Colossals, it definitely would be able to sing. Notably, both Celestial Island and Sugarbush Island have their Colossals' ear with a different object inside of them. Sugarbush Island's Colossal has a pair of headphones in, and Celestial Island's has a pair of earplugs inside its ears to block out sound. I think both of these facts say a lot about each Colossal's personality. I think Celestial Island's is probably a bit grumpy going from the earplugs. Anyway, that's besides the point. What I am getting to here is that the Colossals appear to have the ability capability of hearing things still, even though they remain dormant, indicating here that perhaps not all of the Colossals' life force was drained away, and that they do have the potential to be revived. And then if we look at Composer Island's Colossal, it here is the only Colossal shown to actually wake up in the game. Because of it waking up, it definitely indicates that Colossals each have some life force left, and therefore the capability to be revived by the thing that caused the disruptive force. I just wanted to note that Mirror Islands do have Colossals too, but don't necessarily count towards the game's lore as they are in another dimension. Basically, the Mirror Islands have a completely different setup of lore compared to these, so there's no point going over them, even though they are cool to go over, and I think going into the lore of the Mirror Islands would definitely be cool if that's something that Big Blue Bubble does choose to go into in the future. Ethereal Island's Colossal has a tubing and 5 eyes. It may have 7 eyes too if the 2 other circular features are eyes. So that's pretty wacky there that it has 7 possibly, compared to the other islands which only have 2. I believe Ethereal Island would perhaps be the smartest Colossal going from this. It seems very mystical and intelligent in comparison to the other islands due to all of its unique features like its tubing and elemental features. Many of the Colossals have noses too, and for those that don't, once again, it's likely that those are located further down on the Colossal, like the ears that aren't visible on top of some Colossals. Starhenge fell on top of Celestial Island too, and that explains how Celestial Island exists, as Celestial Island's Colossal would have been dormant when Starhenge fell, so it wouldn't have necessarily had the ability to actually bind itself to the island itself, but seeing as though Starhenge literally fell on top of the Colossal, and perhaps the land on top of it sort of disintegrated along with it due to the impact, it does make sense towards why Starhenge became Celestial Island. Wobbling Island also is composed of electric components and is unlike the other islands. It was actually artificially made, also a light-to-fire oasis when you consider how it was created by Wubbox, going from the Wobbling Island description itself. As it says, this realm was designed and brought to life by a mysterious entity who wanted some playmates. Therefore, a light-to-fire oasis, it raises the question of whether the Fire Oasis Colossal would actually be able to sing if it was given its life force back. Right, so would the Colossals actually be able to wake up? Now we have looked at each island, we can explore the question of whether Colossals would actually be able to wake up further and even more lore behind the game. It's certain that actual disruptive force would need to return for the Colossals to be able to remember how to sing, as mentioned before, and so the disruptive force could return the Colossals' life force back to them. I definitely think this is the only option in the game right now, because this thing seems to be of immense power and capability, so I do believe that it would actually be able to return the Colossals' life force if it was able to take it away in the first place, resulting in the Golden Age of the Dawn of Fire ending and the lore coming up to what we know today with the islands forming and everything. I think it's certain the Colossals would be able to be revived, but the lore behind Ethereal, Sugarbush, Celestial Gold, Composer, and Tribal Islands Colossals is uncertain, so it may be a case of them being affected differently by the lore that we know from the Golden Age of Dawn of Fire and how it concluded, and then potentially not being able to be revived because they may have been impacted differently because they weren't necessarily bound to the island specifically as far as we know. They could have been completely, but as of what we know, it seems that they weren't. But as of what we know that the 5 natural islands and Fire Havens are the only islands specifically to be impacted by the actual disruptive force itself. In terms of the lore, it's not been confirmed whether the other islands were impacted in the same way. We know that they're dormant, so they must have been impacted by it somehow, I would say. However, it's not been confirmed by the lore, so once again, that is speculation. Also, the fact that both Fire Oasis and Wobbling Islands Colossals were artificially made brings up the possibility of them just not being able to be given life force back at all. I definitely think it would be the case where they would be able to be given the life force back, but again, it's something that is unconfirmed. It may be a case where they can't be given any life force at all. I would just also like to bring up as well that this thing that was behind the disruptive force actually did cause the continent to split up, perhaps unintentionally, and whilst it did in a way drain away the life force of the Colossals, it perhaps didn't intend to, because the Colossals had to drain away their life force once they bound to the islands to save the monsters on top of them. So in that case, they didn't necessarily intend perhaps to get rid of the life force, but who knows, maybe that was a part of their plan, guys. I mean, I've been saying that the disruptive force would be able to actually revive the Colossals due to their ability to cause them not to be able to sing in the first place and the devastating impacts to the continent itself, but if you think about it, they didn't actually take away the life force itself. They only caused the Colossals not to be able to sing. So that once again adds to the possibility of it not being being able to revive the Colossals themselves. But if you think about it, just being able to cause the destructive force itself and being able to inflict all the damage to the continent and making all the lands split up and causing the Colossals not to be able to sing, that right there, guys, just completely concludes to me the amount of power this thing behind the destructive force has. Anyway, that's all for today, guys. In the next part to this two-part video series, we are going to be looking into the true villain behind My Singing Monsters and what exactly caused the destructive force that caused the Colossals to not be able to sing and the continent to ultimately split up. Was this thing even planning disaster? We'll have to get into it next time, guys. The next part of this video series is going to be full of speculation, theories, and I am absolutely sure it will change your perception behind the game, because it sure has for me. It will be absolutely jam-packed too, guys. I know this wasn't really theory-based, this part, but the next one, trust me, there's tons of theories into it and loads of loose ends that we're just going to connect in terms of the lore. If you're wondering why this two-part series is actually in two parts, because I know you guys are probably wondering that, it's actually because this video got that big that I ended up having to cut it into two parts. The script for this thing is already 5,000 words. I couldn't really do anything, guys. I hope you all understand, guys. I will see you later, guys, in the next part where we're going to be exploring the true villain. I'll see you later, guys. Bye.